Their argument that Australia shouldn't sell off the farm to foreigners is one we've heard often before. The difference this time is that many of the companies wanting to invest are state-owned. China's quest for more minerals to fuel its growth is pushing mining exploration into prime agricultural land, and that's what's sparking the new round of calls for an overhaul of foreign investment rules. Political editor Chris Uhlmann.
Australians have long worried about foreigners stealing their land and mineral wealth. Once it was the British.
Mr Lang passed a law imposing a special tax on mortgages, which was aimed particularly at the large English land companies which had such a great interest in New South Wales broad acres.
Whitlam Government Minister Rex Connor hated foreign-owned mining companies.
When they talk about buying back the farm, they make Minerals and Energy Minister Rex Connor of Wollongong sound like Norman Gunston's country cousin.
Then, in an echo of gold rush-era fears, came the Asian takeover.
The Japanese land rush began 13 years ago. Conservative estimates say that in New South Wales, Asians have invested $1,500 million in the housing market.
Have you been to the land down under?
In fact, the Australian lifestyle has always been funded by foreigners.
Well, Australia runs a current account deficit, which is about 6% of GDP. That 6% of GDP has to be funded by foreigners, and we're a $1 trillion economy, 1.1 trillion in fact by now. So there's a substantial amount of money which has to be found each month to fund the excess of investment over savings in Australia.
The idea that we don't want foreign investment in Australia would mean that literally millions of jobs would dry up. It would also mean that our cost of living would increase remarkably. It would mean that the standard of living which Australians currently enjoy would fall away considerably.
The level of foreign investment in Australia today is unprecedented as mining companies rush to cash in on commodity prices driven skywards by the rise of China. And China's also making direct investments. That's seen age-old concerns rise again.
Mining ownership in Australia is as high as 83% foreign-owned, and that there's a large flow, a multi-billion-dollar flow of profits from that overseas ownership out of the country.
The Greens say $50 billion in profits will be shipped offshore over the next 5 years, something the industry disputes. The major parties point to the billions that stay here and wash through the economy in jobs, building and taxes.
When I was a union rep representing workers, the test for me wasn't always the ethnicity or the national identity of the owner of the company. It was whether or not they would employ Australians, whether or not they would employ Australians on good conditions, whether or not they were providing services which built up Australian communities, particularly in the regions, whether or not the products which were being delivered on balance helped advance Australian families and individuals.
Foreign investors take millions out of our country, but they put billions in first.
But the deeper question is whether Australia's getting a fair share of its mineral wealth. The government will take a larger share with its yet-to-be-passed mining tax. The Greens are pushing for a return to an earlier resource tax model which pushed for a much higher take.
I would like to see more of that money flowing back into Australia.
The Gillard government's made a deal about what the tax should be. I have no doubt that that's the deal we intend to apply in the Parliament.
The drive to find ever more mineral wealth is pushing exploration into agricultural land, like the Liverpool Plains in northern New South Wales. There, Chinese-owned Shenhua Watermark Coal has spent $213 million buying 43 farms and $300 million on an exploration licence. And that's uniting opposite ends of the political spectrum.
We really need to keep a tab on this and need to be able to see whether it's a good exchange. 20 or 30 years of coal mining in exchange for centuries of food production.
That's something that the Coalition is doing at the moment. We're having another look at the threshold for these kinds of purchases, because we do have to ensure that what's done is in Australia's national interests.
To understand whether rampant mining investment threatens future food security, you need to know how much agricultural land is being bought. Remarkably, there's no single national register of who owns what, so the federal government has asked a number of its agencies to find out.
How on earth can we make decisions in the future about what is the best strategy to protect the national interest with foreign investment if we don't have a photo of what's actually happening at the moment.
But what is the national interest? Existing law leaves that question in the hands of the Treasurer, and it was written at a time when the major foreign investors were England and the United States. For the first time, Australia's major investor isn't a democracy, and the state owns many of the companies who want to buy the farms and the mines. Ian Harper thinks that's a good reason to recast the law.
I'd like to see the Act be much more specific about what Australia's national interest is. And those who are concerned about equity investment in this country, I think, are concerned that Australia doesn't spell out what its national interest is. Now, that's deliberate because the Act was written for a different era. It's not just Australians who need to be concerned about where Australia's national interest lies with foreign direct investment. It's also the Chinese, our primary new investor. They want to know what Australia's national interest is too, and they want us to tell them so that they know where the line is drawn and what's acceptable and what's not. We need to be much clearer about this for our own good, as well as for the good of those who are investing here.
The government will have its report on who owns what land by October, and it's also working on a national food security plan. But as yet, it sees no reason to revisit the foreign investment rules.
It is certainly true that the centre of economic gravity in the whole world is moving to Asia. But it's already the case that 7 of our top 10 trading partners are Asian nations. Now, we're happy enough for Asian countries to buy our stuff, to buy our food, to buy our services, to buy our minerals. So I don't think we should be frightened of the future. I think that the opportunities being on the fringe of the fastest growing region of the world are very good for Australia.